And I personally think if I really felt compelled to join the military when I was young because the country got attacked or because I was just wanted to be a military person or do some certain job in the military and I was disabled or I was trans or something like that, and that I was just blocked off from that like gay men used to be, then it would really like leave a hole in my actualization of my life. Like as looking back on my life and like, shit, I never could be in the US military. I could never serve one day with those guys because of what I was doing on the weekend or whatever, or how I was born. And I think there's a job where they can do it. Like just give them a fucking uniform. Like it doesn't make the Rangers any less legal, or the Navy SEALs are still going to know how to swim just because there's like a trans guy working at the motor pool or whatever. And no one fucking cares, I mean, we have to settle these issues. Hi, everybody. This is John Koenig back from Unauthorized Media with good friend and Air Force veteran, Mason Ballou. Mason, would you like to introduce yourself again to the show?
Sure. Just the Air Force veteran of the channel, and kind of like technology and space warfare, like the future of space travel, and a huge IT software programming nerd in general. So
that's right. And you've been on the show before. We had a good show, and just working on scheduling, trying to keep things rolling, and you're up this week. So let's get started with update on the Gaza-Israeli conflict. I was talking about this last week with Jesse. Israeli, Hamas, Gaza. Obviously, we're on. What do you think about it?
I would say that it's a demonstration of exactly what radical Islam is capable of. At the same time, only like 1% of Islamic individuals probably even espouse those kind of values, much less would act on it. So it's definitely not something that should be a condemnation of everyone who practices Islam or, is a Muslim. So I just would say that. But at the same time, it's a demonstration of just how evil the world can be. I think Pete Davidson's Cold Open on Saturday Night Live last week is probably one of the best things that people should watch when it comes down to educating themselves about the true horrors of it. Like personally, I think every single one of those students that's on a student visa that was publicly protesting or speaking in favor of murdering innocent women and children, every one of them should have their student visas revoked. If I were the State Department, if I were in command right now, that would be one of the first things I would be doing. Is any of these people that are espousing such anti-American values like that, we shouldn't let them be here unless they're a U.S. citizen. So
anti-American or is it anti-Israel?
It's both.
Don't they have free speech rights?
Not if they're guests in our country.
The Supreme Court has determined that people who are in the country are subject to the same rights as American citizens, essentially. So, visa action by the State Department on students, especially young people, for First Amendment protected activities seems like that would not hold up in court. So kind of would just be a waste of time, right?
It doesn't matter if it doesn't hold up in court. As long if you get them out of here first, then they're going to take years to fight it.
They're going to appeal it 100 times and go up to the Supreme Court, dude. I mean, it's not going to do anything. It's just
if you use executive action and get them deported before that, they're going to be appealing it from their home country. They lose. That's what I would do. I think it's the right decision.
So you want to round up Muslim college students that support
any college student that is here, non-citizen, that is a guest in this country, that is espousing killing women and children in cold blood.
Okay.
We should revoke their capability to be here.
What if they say, I support the Palestinian movement, but I don't support the Hamas killing, raping, baby stuff?
I'm all right with that.
Okay, so
once
you're basically talking about terrorist sympathizers who also are not American citizens, even though legally they're okay. What problem with this?
Hate speech is protected, but speech inciting violence is not protected.
All right. Okay. And
therefore, they could very easily use that to remove these negative influences on American culture from our society. That's just what I think they should do.
You said at the beginning that it shows radical Islam, but this isn't really, it is an Islamic organization, essentially this radical arm of Muslim Brotherhood. I don't think that the majority of this, it's not really so much racism because they are very similar cultures. They're kind of like neighbors, but they have the different religions and everything. It's anger, it's history, suffering, and it's like a lashing out, and then there's a reaction. It's not really an Islam thing. It's like political and like a cycle of retribution.
Well, it's a perverted form of Islam, like all radical terrorism, like all radical Islamic terrorism.
I mean, they weren't flying Islamic stuff. They put on military gear or whatever they had.
And tried to kill every single man, woman, and child in Israel.
Yeah, I just didn't hear a lot of Islamic messaging from their leaders. It seems more of like national resistance. I mean, there's obviously like a tinge of the Islamic in there. But it doesn't strike me the same as a Taliban where it's just like Sharia law, very strict, Islamic government. They haven't formed like an Islamic government. I don't know if Hamas is an Islamic government. I don't think it's really like a functioning government. I don't really know. I'm not an expert on how Hamas is actually doing this. And they've only been administering essentially this small area, not very successfully. I don't know, man. I guess you're kind of right. I mean, the radical Islam did definitely influence it because they saw ISIS on the media and they adopted a lot of the hardcore tactics of ISIS and, the really bad radical Islamic terrorists, even though I think these people might not be as radical Islam as those like global jihadists, I guess.
Right.
What do you think?
And they did also call for every follower to rise up and start killing people in their neighborhood, right? That was the Global Day of Jihad on Friday that did. It kind of happened. There were 2 attacks in France. I'm guessing the FBI did a much better job than we're giving them credit for in preventing some of those from happening. I feel like the Global Day of Jihad should be seen as a victory for the intelligence community in the United States because there wasn't an attack in the United States.
Okay, I think the Global Day of Jihad essentially is a messaging campaign, right? It's media operations. This isn't like a pre-coordinated thing. Like even if there was a guy who's pissed off in the United States or Canada or something like that, he's like, Global Day of Rage, hell yeah. And he's like, oh shit, I'm busy on Friday the 13th. You know what I mean? Or he just doesn't have time to plan, or he's just like a lone wolf. Like, I mean, it's like, yeah, you can pull out like a butcher knife and like go stabby. Like that's what they do in China and stuff.
That's France. Yeah, they did that. 2 guys did that in France.
I don't know. I mean, I just don't know if it hasn't been super effective. I mean, it definitely scared everybody, but the next time they do it, it's like the cry wolf. Like the next time it's like probably nothing's going to happen. But I don't think it was like necessarily a triumph of the FBI so much as anybody who was trying to do that, who would be willing to do that, like a terrorist attack like that on a Global Day of Rage, it was just not ready yet. I mean, I think there was only a couple of days notice. I mean,
okay, I agree with that. But I would say, I think it's a success of the FBI and our State Department and our entire intelligence network because they probably rejected 1,000 people in the last 10 years that would have been more likely to participate in a Day of Rage. So I think that is a victory that they'll never get credit for.
How do you ascribe the intelligence community's actions to being the cause of there not being an event?
Because like I just said, so I'm sure that how many people have been rejected entering the United States?
I mean, because the border's wide open.
Right,
but anybody can come in.
I don't know the right answer, but I'm guessing that there's been at least one person that's tried to immigrate into the United States that's been rejected because the FBI or State Department said like, yeah, this guy's too radical. This guy's had too much history of radical postings online.
What are you trying to say?
I'm saying that those people that were rejected for immigration in the last decade would have been the most likely to participate, and therefore the vetting process done by the State Department and the FBI is probably the reason why the Day of Rage was unsuccessful in the United States. They will not get credit for that, but I do believe that is a great example of the successes that are never published. So I think great job to the FBI, great job to the CIA, great job to all the intelligence agencies that probably helped make that happen. The other thing is, I disagree with what you're saying about they're just not prepared, because what they were hoping for, there's 2 points here, is what I think Hamas was hoping for is like any asshole that had hit that breaking point would grab a gun and just start killing, right? Like kind of what happened in France. There were 2 attacks in France. Did not occur in the United States. At the same time, I think it's a great example of how bad leadership is in those organizations, because what they're essentially calling for is anyone who listens to us, conduct a suicide mission. And I think there's enough American values that anybody hearing that was like, that's a terrible idea.
Well, there's not that many Muslims in the United States, right? Like France is like 10% Islam, North Africa and stuff like that. We're at probably less than 3%, and we're much bigger. There's neighborhoods that are blocked off, enclaves, I guess you could say. And that just is what it is. But we don't have as big of a domestic problem, essentially, right? And like you talked about the vetting, which vetting an established terrorist or just someone with a bad profile that wants to come in who is rejected, who could just go over the border or any other million ways to get in the country.
Right.
But like say they did, I mean, yes, that's always good. But then you also have like radicalization after they come here. Like they come here and they're normal and then they radicalize. That can be a very quick flash to bang, especially if they're being manipulated by somebody who's, older
right.
or in a senior position to them, kind of like a groomer. So, I mean, that could be radicalized in 18 months and they got a suicide bomber. He was normal before. He might even be like a normal American white guy. He might not even be Middle Eastern looking fellow. Anything could happen. It's terrorism. And I guess, I don't know. We're lucky we haven't getting hit.
I agree. And then, that attack is that kind of an attack, like a grassroots attack where they're asking anyone to just start killing. It's indefensible at first, right? Like, I mean, those people will not succeed. They will all get killed or arrested. But the initial victim, like you saw in France, is tough to defend.
Yeah, but you would need gear, like to do some serious damage. Like even if you're in the United States where you can get an assault weapon and stuff like that, you'd have to get the rifle. You're gonna have to get a bunch of ammo, magazines, learn how to use it. Like most of these guys aren't like military trained with that. He's gotta go to the range. He's gotta buy some gear, figure out how all that works. It's just gonna take a while to do all that. And these guys, if they're just some radical guy who's just mad and wants to do some stuff, yeah, it's easy for them to pull out a butcher knife, sneak up on one or two people, but I mean that's not going to take down the country.
Right. But if 100 people did that on the Day of Rage, that would strike some fear, even in a guy like me.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if it's like a butcher knife thing, you go out, you like don't let anyone sneak up on you, keep your head on a swivel, like you and your family are gonna be okay. If it's like assault rifles, bombs, backpack bombs, other stuff that's indiscriminate and an average citizen can't like kind of precaution themselves against. Good example, the DC sniper. I don't know if you were around here back then. I was in college at that time. But, I mean, everyone was scared as fuck, man. Like, people were, like, zigzagging in the parking lot and stuff. Like, that was for real. It's just, like, the method of violence and the tactics employed by the attackers and everything like that. Because it's, it's psychological warfare.
Yeah. And this is an evolution in tactics. Like, even just calling for a Day of Rage, I don't really remember that happening in the last 20 years.
They're patterning off Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is probably the most successful political movement in political resistance, rights, whatever movement of the last, probably since the civil rights movement, or maybe it's like South African apartheid or something. But I mean, it was wildly successful and they use media and everything. And it seems like they have a pretty decent media strategy. Israel's always had a really good online media strategy and everything like that. But I mean, there's an online battlefield that's taking place out there between these two groups of conflicting parties in the Middle East. I want to talk about some interesting different things about Gaza that showed up in the news. We can talk a little bit about each one because we already talked for a little while. First one is the hypothesis, unproven, that Putin and Russia had something to do with Hamas Gaza attack.
Before we segue on one thing, on the note of Black Lives Matter, because I thought it was a really good point you made on like that they're modeling after BLM. But I will say the other final interesting component, how many Americans accidentally funded Hamas by giving money to Black Lives Matter? Because BLM has now given money to Hamas.
I don't think they gave money to Hamas. I haven't seen that. I think people
they've been
going crazy.
They've been out vocally supporting them and sending money to Palestinian aid groups, and some percentage of any Palestinian aid is going to go to Hamas.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, I mean, then you're saying you basically can't give any aid to the Palestinians because some of it might go to Hamas. I don't know.
I'm okay with that. Right
okay.
Now.
All right. Okay.
Sorry, I'm a little cold right now. I'm cold-hearted towards it. They were killing women and children. Just when
everyone kills women and children, bro. Like even the fucking Air Force. You know how many women and children the Air Force has killed?
A lot.
I mean, come on. All right, so Putin's birthday is October 7th, which was the day of the attack. I mean, that's circumstantial, but I mean, like,
it was about a Jewish holiday attack. It wasn't about Putin's birthday.
I know, but I mean, anyway, it's part of there's a hypothesis here, and it's coming from the Ukrainian media and stuff like that. But basically, they're saying that ever since 2022, that Iran and Russia, because of this like power vacuum that was in the Middle East, after Obama fucked it up and let ISIS take over the Middle East, and then he didn't do anything about it, and then Trump went in there, smashed ISIS, took control over there. Rangers were driving across Syria and everything, but then he pulled back, abandoned the Kurds and everything, and left this power vacuum. After a while, Russia started moving in there. Wagner, we all know what happened, but Iran's also in there because of Hezbollah, and they have their parties, and everyone's got their fingers in Syria because it's not even a country anymore. So they got to a partnership, right? And like they both don't like us, so it's like shit. And they've been helping each other, right? Like the Iranians have been sending drones to Russia, those Shahed drones. The Russians have probably been doing a lot of stuff for them too. And I think they're trading other stuff as well. They're obviously doing business. And it's a budding security relationship. So there's been some meetings. Putin, I think from what I read, went to Iran in February 2022. And there's been other high-level meetings between Russians and Iranians in the respective capitals and everything like that. So potentially it might not be Russian directed, but they definitely might have known that something was coming or whatever, because it super helps Putin. I mean, it super duper duper helps Putin.
How's that?
Because it takes all the heat off of
Ukraine. And we're not going to support Ukraine as much.
Yeah, and we're not, you know what I mean? And we're right in the middle of the conflagration in the Congress. We don't have a Speaker of the House, and they didn't pass Ukraine. They passed the CR without the Ukraine money, and so we're in this like limbo, and they hit us like right now. They hit the Israelis really hard right when they weren't expecting it and like didn't need it, and they basically kind of hit us a little bit, because now we have to deal with this, and a lot of our attention is focused on this. All of our attention has been focused on Ukraine for the most part. I mean, obviously we pay attention to other stuff, but like, we're running out of ammo in Ukraine, and we're still almost out of ammo. Now the Israelis, this probably won't be a big ammo spendex, but Ukraine is obviously. Got articles on that later. Could this have been, coordinated? I mean, if this was coordinated, let's hypothesize, if this was coordinated by Putin, then that means our enemies, at least these two enemies, and China's in the mix with both of them too, are gathering, coordinating, and landing some punches.
Okay, so I would say I agree that it did benefit Russia. I didn't make that connection at all, just because to me, I already wanted us out of funding Ukraine. So I thought that was already going to happen regardless of this attack on Gaza, right? Because I think the defunding of the Ukraine war was already happening before the attack. I think he will benefit from it. So yes,
it wasn't defunded; it just wasn't further funded.
Correct. Yeah, it wasn't further funded after that continuing resolution. Is mine. Yeah. But so that had already happened. But Vlad Putin does benefit, and ideally, it will just restrict or reduce the amount of future resources we will have available to send to that theater of war. It is interesting to think of them opening up. Essentially, if it was a coordination, that would be opening up in a new front in World War III to try and divert resources, right? That's like almost like a flanking movement on a global scale, which is pretty brilliant if that happened. The other thing I would say, just as far as American priorities go, if you were to think of Russia's advance in Ukraine, like America's not the next target. As far as you can tell, Iran, as soon as they get done with Israel, they want to take on America, right? So like Israel is kind of our beachhead still. So that's why like we're the second round of attack in a Middle Eastern attack, but we're not the second round of attack in an Eastern European attack. So that's why Israel should be getting more of our resources.
To talk about Iran wants to fight Israel. They don't want to fight us necessarily.
Yet.
I mean, they have beef with us, but they know in the long run they're not going to come to America and really fight us or anything like that. They really have this beef with Israel. We back off Israel, and so we're the far enemy. That Israel's the near enemy.
You don't think there are any of the Quds forces, like the Iranian Green Berets in the U.S. right now?
Of course, yes. I mean, everybody has spies everywhere.
They're fighting us already. They're just doing it asymmetrically.
Of course, we're dealing with asymmetric enemies all around except for China. What I'm trying to say about Iran is that their focus is on Israel. They don't necessarily want the conflict totally to end because it fuels their theocratic rule, the angst,
nationalism,
and the way that they're able to use it as a cudgel against a foreign enemy in order to, juice up their military and juice up their population and engender the support that they need to keep doing what they're doing. Because there are a lot of people in Iran. Iran is a very young country, and there's a lot of people in Iran that would like to have not the mullahs, but that's not really realistic right now. We had remember the big Masa Amini protests, I think it was last year, because they beat this woman to death, put her in the cell because she didn't have her hair covered properly at all or whatever. And so she was like a 22-year-old girl. And they had these huge protests. The big difference about those protests was they were female-led. And there's been research that shows that female-led protests are much more effective than male-led protests because they're not as violent. They just do a better job for a variety of reasons, which I don't have off the top of my head.
I think Russia, like the last czars fell when the women started leading the protests. I'm pretty sure that was like one of the big distinctions.
Yes. Women have wielded political power at times previous to the modern era at times. So you mentioned Congress, we mentioned the CR, and that we don't have a speaker, and that the CR got passed without any money for Ukraine. And so the Defense Department essentially is running out of money for Ukraine. The hardcore Republicans really don't want it. The liberals want it, and the moderate Republicans kind of want it too because they don't want to see it like go off the rails. You have like a little bit of blocking force from the hard conservatives. And so what the White House is thinking about doing is tying Ukraine aid to Israel aid because the conservatives want the Israel aid, and then that way they can get the two of them through and we can just like keep the guns flowing out. What do you think about the aid package? And the White House is discussing the political viability of this strategy. What do you think about it?
I think we need to stop aiding Ukraine. I think that war has at least hit a bit of a stalemate maybe. And if Russia starts really advancing and winning, revisit that strategy. But let's stop giving Ukraine money for now. Israel doesn't really seem like it needs too much more, but I don't really know. They're winning. Like Israel's got it under control. I think any aid we give them will eventually be like held against us because at some point they're going to lose favor if they lose that information operation campaign. And right now, everything Israel's doing is on the aggressive side. Yeah, it's still acceptable because it's vengeance, but they're going to run out of that sympathy within a year. So they need to do whatever they're going to do within the year because people are going to forget. I would worry that they're going to hold it against us. But hey, one final thought if I can give you on Israel, top line strategy and tactics. Do you think if we were still at Bagram, if we had a forward presence at Bagram, do you think this attack would have happened? I would say no because I think they...
Yeah, I don't think Bagram has anything to do with this.
Well, no, but I just think, like, again, you're seeing, like, the military reserves that were funneled, I think, into that theater, right? Some of U.S. weapons that were left behind made it to that fight. Number one, I think that's a definite fact. And number two, the radical Islamic fighters would be more willing to fight the Bagram presence or the American presence forward in Bagram if it was still there. And then since it's no longer there, it's like, again, as I mentioned, the second wave of this attack, if Iran and all the Middle East takes out Israel, the next target is the United States. So it used to be the first target.
The United States, man, that's ridiculous.
I'm saying the first target was Bagram. Was the U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. The first target was the U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan for the last 20 years. Then we've pulled those forces for the most part out. So now the number one target is Israel again. And then once Israel falls, the next target, okay, maybe it won't be the United States. Maybe it'll be Western Europe. I don't know. But the next target will be something obviously other than Israel because it's not there. So right now, Israel is the front line, the beachhead, stymieing the entire world against radical Islam and the expansion of a global caliphate. It used
Israel
to be...
is just in survival mode. They're not protecting the world against global Islam.
They're in survival mode, and they are protecting the world against a global caliphate.
JSOC is. This is ridiculous. All right.
I disagree with you.
Bagram has nothing to do with it. We've got a huge military base in Turkey at Incirlik. There's other military around. There's aircraft carriers floating around. I mean, the fact that Bagram has it's so far away, it doesn't even matter.
But again, I mean, during the entire Global War on Terror, all the fighters were funneling in to fight Americans. And now that Americans aren't there to fight, they're fighting Israelis. That's my point.
These weren't foreign fighters. This was Al-Aqsa Brigade or whatever it was.
But there are foreign fighters now requesting to join. It's still only week one, right? It's still week one. So there are foreign fighters. There have been public posts from Taliban members trying to get through to Iran. There are fighters in every country that are going to start rallying to this fight the longer it goes on. Previously, they would have been fighting Americans that were in Iraq, and Afghanistan, Americans forward. Now they are fighting Israel.
Yeah, okay. They always want to fight Israel because they don't want Israel to be there. Nothing has changed with Afghanistan.
But for the last 20 years, they were mostly fighting us.
These isn't foreign fighters. Hamas is not foreign fighters, okay? Not global jihad. It's Hamas, the government of the Gaza Strip.
Correct, but they're gaining foreign fighters and they're getting foreign support.
They're not getting foreign fighters. No one can get in and out of Gaza, dude. All right, look, you're totally derailing this thing.
Iran is supporting Hamas, right?
Yes.
Okay, you're admitting that. So Iran supporting Hamas with military equipment that would have otherwise probably been diverted to the U.S. theater of war. But now that theater of war is closed, Israel is taking the brunt.
Okay, sure. That's your theory. All right. So Mason is a good example of the hardcore conservatives that don't want any more funding for Ukraine. We can ask the question of like what you think is going to happen if we stop giving Ukraine money and all that. Basically, it would force them to cut a deal with Putin, which Putin's probably ready to cut a deal at this point. So you're basically saying I want to force Ukraine to cut a deal with Putin. But what I also want to ask you is that do you think, okay, so if you were in Congress, if you were a congressman from South Carolina or wherever the hell, and it came up and the deal that the White House put up was Israel aid and Ukraine aid tied together, dollar for dollar, probably not. Ukraine's probably going to be 10 times what the Israelis are going to get. Whatever the ratio is, would you vote on it? Or would you put up an amendment? What would you do?
Right now, I vote no to any external expenses. We need to get our budget under control and stop going into debt more every day because that
wouldn't help the Israelis either.
Correct. The national debt is the number one threat to American sovereignty and the future of America. So we need to fix that first.
All right. So you think it's more likely that the national debt is going to bring down our country rather than Israel collapsing, the Middle East going into chaos, and the oil supplies getting disrupted and the entire global economy getting disrupted? You think spending a few $1 billion, which is nothing, on Israel to make sure that the status quo remains in the Middle East, at least, or whatever?
I think spending a couple $1 billion to maintain stability is a good investment, yes. But from the mentality of our Congress people just spending too much money, we need to just rein that in.
How about this? At
some point, we just got to cut off spending. I think you just said it very well, and I think you're correct, right? I think you said it very well. I think you're correct, and they should do exactly what you said. They should not do what I said, but that's what I would vote. I would still vote no, because I think we need to stop spending money, and my principle would be no to any spending.
All right, so you cut Ukraine off. They need probably $10 billion a month or something like that, or I don't know how much they're spending, honestly. but a lot of money. They're doing it like $40 billion increments. So we know that probably they were looking for another $40 billion. Cut them off, then what happens?
Maybe they lose.
Ukraine loses. What does that look like?
Russia gains a little bit more territory. I mean, they probably have a humanitarian crisis on their hand that they'd have to deal with. Maybe it'd be the start of a 50-year global expansion by Russia, but I don't think Russia can keep going further, especially with NATO there. So I would say let's just wait until NATO has to get involved. The other thing on Israel, again, I think they're going to win. So I don't think they need too much more support.
Okay, that's the other thing I want to ask you about. You're assuming that there's no expansion of the war, even though Hezbollah is ready to go, even though there might be other...
I think there is going to be an expansion of the war, but I think Israel's going to take care of it. I think Israel needs to conquer the Gaza Strip on this. I think what Israel needs to do for the future of its country, if I were Netanyahu, I would conquer the Gaza Strip and move everyone that is there into Egypt, force them as refugees across the border into Egypt. There's going to be like a refugee town on the other side of Egypt. It's going to be the launching point of future attacks. It'll be the next Gaza Strip, if you will. It's a desert location that's probably inhabitable right now, but that's what I would do if I were them.
If you were the president and Hezbollah starts launching 10,000 rockets a day into Israel and are attacking them, are you going to launch aircraft off 4 aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean and strike at the Hezbollah rocket launchers and probably also their command and control of their air defenses and stuff like that? You're going to have to take all that stuff down. So would you order the Navy, et cetera, to do that?
If Israel asked for the assistance, I would give it a very good consideration, 75% chance of yes. But I'd have to talk to Israel first, assess their capabilities, and ask them why they're not doing it themselves first.
I've got a really cool story. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but I thought it was interesting. It's like a war story from on the ground in Israel, and it's about this Israeli grandfather who is a former major general in the I assume some kind of special forces thing they got over there. It's being compared to Liam Neeson in Taken, like this badass guy going to get his daughter or whatever, and with his skills from the CIA or whatever. His name's Noam T-Bon, 62, and lives in Tel Aviv, which is the capital, if you're not super familiar, kind of in the middle of the country on the coast. And this all happened in the south, so you're looking at probably like a 90-minute drive. These guys were probably driving fast to get down there, right? I'm going to give some of the details, set the situation. We can talk through the story a little bit. Did you have a chance to read it?
I've heard of it, but you didn't share this with me.
All right. Well, I put it on there later, but his son is an award-winning Israeli journalist named Amir T-Bon, and he was living in Nahal Oz kibbutz in southern Israel, somewhere along the border, and was under threat from the attacks. So he calls his father, because the terrorists are running around. He calls his father, and I guess his father had seen, this is early in the morning, reports or whatever, knows what's going on, activates, kind of like in the movie. And then he takes his wife, which I think is badass. He says to his son, "Trust me, I will come." 10 hours later, he gets there and saves the family. A bunch of stuff happened in the meantime. But what do you think about it? Like, what would you do if you were in Tel Aviv and your son and your grandkids were in their house surrounded by Hamas terrorists and the army wasn't helping? Because the army didn't help these people. The Israelis are wondering where the army was. I think it took 2 days for them to take a lot of this area back. What would you do, and what do you think about the story here?
I think the IDF failed in this regard. How these festival goers were completely unprotected is a failure.
Obviously, Mason. Obviously.
Yeah. The guy is a badass. And there's lots of stories like this coming out. I think there was one about like a female former IDF fighter, like went to like the police station, got out the arsenal, armed everyone in the town, and they fought off. It was like the only little town that wasn't taken over.
Yeah, there's a lot of heroic stories coming out. Yep.
So this is just one of them. But like, yeah, this guy's a badass. I probably, honestly, to be perfectly honest with you, I probably would have, I'm guessing they tried to recall him. Like they tried to bring him back to work with the military. I probably would have gone to the recall.
I didn't see him on a recall. I mean, this is at 6 a.m. The army is not recalling him. His son's calling. I think basically anyone would go. I mean, You're a military trained person. Obviously, you're in this like Israeli situation.
I would get my arsenal and go.
He only had a pistol, by the way. So you basically have to go. I mean, what are you going to do? Like your son and your grandkids all get massacred and you did nothing? Like, you're going to kill yourself or something. You know, you have to try. So basically, he has to try. So he goes out, he gets in the car with his wife. They drive down towards the kibbutz. He left Tel Aviv with a pistol. Once he got to Sderot, where is the vicinity of where the festival massacre happened, they came across festival goers with no shoes on that needed help. So they took a break from their mission and drove the kids in their car further away from the border, thereby ensuring their safety, and then backtracking probably to go towards where they wanted to go. They know where their son lives, obviously. They're going to the house. So they're further down the road. They pick up an IDF soldier, kind of like on D-Day Normandy. They're like picking people up along. Pick up an IDF soldier. They run across a group of IDF who are fighting a Hamas cell on the way there. He joins in with them. They kill all of the Hamas. 2 of the soldiers are wounded. He probably treats them. He puts them in his car, and then his wife drives them back because they're wounded. The soldiers give him their weapons and ammo, and he says, I'm going back in, which is badass. Like, that's cool. So he's by himself. Then he meets another general in his uniform, Israel Ziv. And so there's these 2 retired 16-year-old men driving down there. And when they get to the village, they join up with the IDF in that area, like right there, that were getting ready to retake the kibbutz. And they push in with them. I assume they killed some Hamas guys. He gets to his son's house. They're still in the house. And outside, he finds the bodies of 5 dead Hamas terrorists and 1 dead IDF soldier who had fought off the 5 and saved his family, but was dead. No, he bangs on the window and he says, it's safe. You can come out now. It's pretty cool, right?
Badass.
I would assume it would be a movie someday.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And again, like all my bravado, on one hand, like if they had recalled him, he probably should have gone in the recall. But on the other hand, it's kind of badass that he just like, let's fucking go. Unfortunately, that recall would make people too slow to get there to support oftentimes. I mean, the guy's a badass.
Yes, obviously very badass. Cool story.
So I like the fighting spirit of the Israelis, man. They all are, there's for the most part these days, since they all have that mandatory military service, they're all fighters. I was just kind of surprised at, again, that how disarmed the populace is there. Like, I figured there would just be more weaponry.
I was super surprised like that. I mean, I know that they were overwhelmed. There were like a lot of these Hamas guys. Like, I think they said there's over 1,200 of them that went into Israel. But I thought these Israelis, especially you're living right by the border, I thought they would have to, like, at least assault rifles, fucking grenades and shit, like fresh mags, like, be like, oh, baby, they're here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, I'd be ready. If I were living there, I don't get it.
I was shocked. Like they didn't have, like, the average citizen there, it didn't seem like was able to return fire. You know, you have the conscription, they have a conscription. So basically everybody's been in military service for essentially, especially like the men or whatever. And it's like, I thought they all had guns.
Yeah, there was a video I saw, and then you see like, you know, one of the gun trucks, it's not even a gun truck, just a truck full of dudes with guns riding down the street. And I'm like, you're recording this. Why aren't you laying down fire? Like, you're a former military member. Where's your arsenal? Why do you not have at least one weapon? And why are you not killing every single one of these guys? Because you have a perfect elevated position. And as soon as you unload on those guys, if you start off with a good barrage and take out the engine block, or you just kill the driver, at the very least, if there's 10 guys in a truck and you shoot at it, you're probably going to kill one. I don't care how bad you are. Like, I remember watching that video of the Hamas starting their terror run, and I was just like, why are they not receiving fire? They're driving down like the downtown of a fully weaponized city. But clearly, Israel needs to rearm their populace because they have lost that message.
I understand maybe you're in the middle of Tel Aviv or you're at the beach or something. You're not anywhere near this kind of stuff. That maybe not, but I just can't believe it. You're right on the border. I mean, they can see them. There's just a fence there. And, you know, it's so, I mean, I see it as dangerous. I mean, I guess maybe they were desensitized to the danger over time. But yeah, I would expect firearms. But we didn't have that.
One additional thought I want to make sure we talk, because I think we're about to wrap this one up. But like, I am shocked that they took American prisoners. I feel like, I mean, obviously they're going to take American prisoners. But like, I was jokingly like, you know how dumb it is to take an American prisoner right now? Like you're already dealing with the IDF, right? So you pissed off that. But as long as they have, I think it was like 20 Americans captured. Guess what is right next to Gaza? I think is it the Black Sea or Mediterranean Sea? I need to look at my geography. Water. So Navy SEALs are about to whoop some ass. Like, don't piss off Navy SEALs.
It's an intel thing. Obviously, the Navy SEALs could go in and take a building or go into a tunnel or something, but it's like you have to know where they are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
But I just mean like these Navy SEALs are gonna get some vengeance.
I don't think the U.S. military. I don't know. I'm not on the pulse of it, I guess, but I don't know if it's really like a personal thing for the U.S. military. I think there's a sympathetic reaction from the U.S. military. I think everybody has a sympathetic reaction, but I don't know if it's like people in the U.S. military like are as out to get Hamas. Obviously, as the Israelis are, like the Israelis are like out to get Hamas.
Well, yeah,
obviously.
But there are 20 American citizens, I think, that are still missing.
I know, but I mean,
and that gives us the incentive to go in. And one, you asked earlier, would I do?
It doesn't change the calculus, though.
Well, actually, earlier you asked a question of me of if would I authorize airstrikes against those Hamas targets. I would say that's kind of 50-50 to me. But would I authorize SEAL Team 6 to go in and kill some people and do a hostage rescue? Fuck yes.
Yeah, but then you're putting your assets at risk, and you could have Gold Star families and stuff. And
I know, but that's what SEAL Team 6...
What's the chance of mission success? The SEALs are going to look right at you and be like, this is not a good idea.
If that's the case, then we probably wouldn't do it. But I would say it'd be more likely to authorize SEAL Team 6 to go in when there's water right there.
Dude, the Israelis are going to be the best people to get back every single one of those hostages. Like, they know that area, they know the language,
Correct.
They're going to be the best ones to go.
Correct. But I'm just saying, on that, you asked that earlier question of authorization of U.S. force. I think it'd be more likely to authorize the use of SEAL Team 6 or Navy SEAL resources than U.S. airstrikes.
Well, it's easier to because it's obviously covert. And the White House have basically said they don't want boots on the ground, and they're only sending advisors, technical advisors, and special forces guys and stuff like that to kind of be there and to lend assistance if necessary. But the idea is they wouldn't be in combat. I mean, obviously, these are top secret missions. They can do whatever they want. These guys are, in operator mode, and you know how it is. But it seems like we're not trying to get our elite units tangled up in these missions. Like I said, it really makes sense for the Israelis to do this. They're fully outfitted. They are super fucking motivated. I mean,
I agree.
They're willing to take the risk. I mean, it really makes sense to have the Israelis do this, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance where we need. The fact that there's American hostages does give the American president more of an opportunity to engage us in this, because it's like, I don't say it's a pretext, but I mean, it is justification for military action as they've got hostages. Now, if they released all the Americans, they were like, all the Americans, let's cut them. They let a woman and 2 children go earlier, so they have been at least released 3 people. And so it's potential. It might be a political strategy where they just release the Americans. I mean, all that's going to happen is they're all just going to get killed in bomb strikes anyways. So why don't you just release them, and then that way it puts more pressure on the Americans. It's like there's no more Americans. It's just one-on-one between Hamas and the Israelis. So, and then obviously we have the political thing here, throw a little in the mix, see what happens. But there could be some asymmetric strategies and political strategies that could be used. But who knows exactly what they'll do.
Final thought, just as you mentioned, Special Forces, DevGru, those guys, that's what they do. But at the very least, it's just a chance for us to work on communicating with the Israelis for future military operations. So just getting that initial couple of SEAL teams over there working with them starts establishing that relationship.
The relationship's already there.
True.
This isn't a fucking relationship building mission. Right? This is like splitting skulls,
which Navy SEALs are very good at. Glad they're on my team.
Yeah, of course.
And again, it's right by water. Let me just look up the geography, make sure it's the Black Sea of Mediterranean.
Yes, there is precedent for special ops raids going into Beirut. The Israelis have done that. They come up on the beach, they pull off their shit, and then they go into the city where they have like a motorbike or something. There's some intel guys got some stage up stuff for them. They go up to the building, hit that building, blah 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 blah, back out to the beach, dive back, out to a boat, out to some Navy ship that's out there. I mean, there's definitely precedence for these coastal attacks. They just had that video where the Israeli coastal patrol there caught Hamas divers in the water trying to go around, get into Israel, do a little bit more attack type action, and they were just plugging them right in the water. Like, they must have been having a good old time, trust me. Like, especially after what just happened, dude, they were just like, Did you see that video?
I didn't see the divers, but I saw the gunboats getting taken out by, like, there were boats full of like militants on rivers, it looked like, or maybe approaching the water or the beach front, and they were getting taken out by Israeli airstrikes. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, they're on full alert now, obviously. So moving on to the next article, which is about TSMC. We've got a lot of updates about TSMC. I really want Mason and I to go into how the chips are playing out. We're talking about the essentially mobile chips, a little bit about the AI chips. Mostly we're talking about mobile chips. These companies in Asia that are producing the chips using machines produced in the Netherlands that are designed based on IP that was developed in California, which is why we control it from the top down kind of here. So South Korea and US agreement has identified Samsung and SK Hynix, 2 big companies in Korea, as validated end users, meaning that they have the indefinite right to import new chip making equipment for their China based operations, which is important for their companies to keep working and for global supplies of cell phones and other equipment to keep on as normal. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, also has operations in China. They've gotten 1 year permission to put new chip making equipment, but just to replace an upgrade. They've said that their Fab 16, which is their biggest factory, I believe, will have no significant advancements, basically just keeping it running, I assume, and at the same level generation of technology. They're not going to go to the next level of technology because they want to bring that next level of chip making, toward back to America and spread it out into Europe and some of these other places, not just around the Pacific Ocean. So what'd you think about the agreement and the diplomacy involved here and all that?
So it's kind of confusing to me, like you just mentioned. I thought the article was actually poorly written in the sense of they didn't explain
probably
where.
Written by AI, dude. I mean, yeah. Let's be real.
Well, like you said, that Korean-based chip company, but that has locations in China. But is it mainland China or is it Taiwan? Because there's a big distinction there for me.
Yeah, these are mainland China operations, but they're using the equipment. But they're South Korean and Taiwanese companies.
It doesn't matter. I care about where the production is. I don't want any production in mainland China. So I'm against it. I think we need to bring all of it back as quickly as humanly possible.
Obviously.
We should cut off external supplies, even if it results in a short-term shortage.
Okay, that's going to fuck up the whole economy and then put us all in a recession and fuck everything.
It'll require us to rapidly invest in the capability in the United States. So maybe give it we just need to be investing heavily in that capability of production here.
All right, well, we'll keep thinking about Mason's strategy as we go through the articles, but moving on to another TSMC issue, because this is along the lines of what you're talking about, is they're building a fab in Arizona, 2 fabs in Arizona. One of them, I believe the bigger one, is a mirror copy of their Tainan Fab 18. And there are simmering culture clashes there where issues are kind of hindering and making it tough for TSMC, right? These are not the biggest fabs, and they essentially want to see if they can do this. It's kind of like a pilot, and then they'll expand it if it can work. They don't have local talent in Arizona to work in these factories, so they have to bring in Taiwanese, and there's not really a local talent pool, and there's other issues. But it doesn't seem like the Arizona plant is going that well. It's not going to be building the most advanced generation of chips or the next generation of chips, which we're going to talk about. And it doesn't seem all that great. It's part of the CHIPS Act. It might go well. Hopefully it does. I don't think it's going to solve the problem. It might help our chip situation, and it's a good start. But we need to be doing more. We have the CHIPS Act. What do you think?
So I like that, what you just mentioned, of bringing it over to Arizona, but we need to invest heavily in that. And whatever talent is lacking, if you hire Americans to do that job and you just pay them enough, maybe a subsidy, which I'm usually against subsidies, but in the short term, sometimes you have to do it. That's the way to solve that problem. I just think we need to have a concrete plan of, at the very least, like 2.5 years to get this capability in the United States. I don't know how long it takes to build up one of these facilities to have this capability, but anything gets faster if you put enough money into it. So I think we need to focus very heavily on getting this capability built in the United States as fast as possible.
But if we throw money at the problem, then we risk getting ripped off. We're already getting ripped off all over the place. China had a semiconductor super fund years ago. They have a new one because the old one got stolen. So how do you mitigate against that?
You can't. You're going to get some theft.
Unmitigated. Okay, you just said the national debt is the biggest threat to the economy and everything. And then you say in the second breath that
true,
we should throw money at the problem and not worry about if we get ripped off and there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, I mean, the government contracting office, that's their job. Like, they're already supposed to be looking into theft, fraud, waste, and abuse at all times.
Yeah, and you think they do a good job? Is that going to work?
No. I think we also need to change government contract law to stop giving benefits for no reason, not give, whatever Joe Schmo, who's minority, veteran, woman-owned company, 10% benefit. Like, that's stupid. That's just adding a markup that the administrative lawyers know how to circumvent now. Like, that's the theft that we need to get rid of. But if we're investing and we're hiring only American companies...
Is that a serious problem here? Is that just a pet peeve of yours?
It's a pet peeve.
Exactly.
But if we invest only in American companies to do this, at the very least, that theft and waste will at least stay in America.
So in the article, TSMC chair Mark Liu says Arizona is their first trial of overseas mega site development. They are going to do Germany and Japan, I think. But it's not for certain. They could change, they could pivot, or whatever. $40 billion, 640 football fields in area. Problems are that construction costs have been several times higher than expected. And they only have about half of the 4,500 people that they would need to run these two fabs at full capacity, which would produce 60,000 wafers per month. And then each of those wafers has multiple chips on it, depending on how it's laid out and designed. You think it's going to work? You think it's going to work?
They need to find a way to incentivize people to work there, because you said they only have enough to staff it at half capacity. So it sounds like a personnel issue that they need to overcome pretty quickly.
Oh, there's personnel issues. Also, bringing up on that is the environmental issues. So there's a bipartisan bill to exempt these fabs from an environmental review. However, the Environmental Protection Agency and Environmental Protection Act is a sunshine law, which demands public review, public involvement, especially if there's significant impact to the community and the environment. And obviously, if we go through public comment and all this stuff, it's going to slow the chip factory down. And we can't afford that because China doesn't have to go through this. It's just not a luxury we have. The Build Chips in America Act is sponsored by Senators Mark Kelly, Todd Young, Bill Hagerty, and Sherrod Brown. I think this will pass. So we'll get these chip factories. The thing that worries me, if you don't do the environmental impact study, they might build in a place where water pools up, or there's some sort of feature of the land that thereby messes up the foundation of it or could cause problems later down the road. Most of the environmental damage that these places incur and have incurred in the past in California is based on chemicals that they use. So I don't know if this is really a public comment thing. I don't know, but we can't afford it. We just have to build these things and
give them an expedited window. Give them a 1 month window to do it. Like, I don't know what the current window is. Like in a standard process, maybe it's a year. Shorten it to a month. Give people the chance, but not much of a chance.
Well, I don't know the details of the bill. Maybe it does provide for a curtailed period, but this is what it is. But I think it'll pass, and that way they will move faster. Hopefully.
But we got to get going fast. I mean, World War III, it might be here, right? Like, so one of the big things I keep mentioning is, when do you think World War II started? So I've been asking a lot of people.
I don't want to talk about hypothetical bullshit.
No, here's the thing.
I don't want to talk about
No, it's not a hypothetical.
Yeah, it's such a hypothetical.
Just hear me out. When people think about when World War II started, they might say Pearl Harbor. They might say the invasion of Poland. Most people would not say when Japan invaded mainland China in the early 1930s. But that was really the start of World War II. So all I'm saying is, in 100 years, when people look at World War III, they may say World War III started when Ukraine and Russia got started. They may say World War III started when Hamas invaded Israel. These could be what historians look at as the start of World War III. Hopefully it's not, but it could already be here. And what we could be doing right now is indebting our country so we can't even afford to fight the future war. And that's why the national debt is the greatest risk. Again, going back to that statement, which you said that's correct, like the hypocrisy of my statement, sending $1 billion to Israel, that's funding external sources. Spending $1 billion to build chips in the United States, at the very least, that money's staying in America.
Yeah, what you said is true. I mean, it's not a great situation. Okay, Mason has a World War III fetish, so you're just going to hear about World War III a lot if you're watching the videos I make with him.
I do.
Yes, you do. I know. Spends a lot of time thinking about it. All right. If we get into a World War III situation, or it's probably not, I personally don't think it's going to be a World War III situation, but if we get into some sort of serious conflict with China, part of their strategy in their asymmetric warfare is to control the economics around rare earth metals, which are used in a lot of things electronics-wise. If we're going to get into World War III, I don't think it's going to be World War III, but if we get into something with China, they're going to use their dominance of the rare earth metals market, commodities market, to apply pressure on us, especially if we start applying pressure on them through controlling their access to chip making equipment and thereby chips that are necessary for cell phones and AI. China right now controls 68% of the germanium market and 98% of the gallium market, which are used in semiconductor production. And they've cut off shipments of these in response to American chip controls. What do you think about it? How do we think we respond to the fact that we don't have a reliable supply chain for these metals that we need for chips, et cetera, Mason?
Obviously, a national security risk, we need to fix it. So there's going to be some key resources that we need to make sure we lock down the future access to, like oil being one, which we should be good on. But yes, this is a key new emerging strategic risk for the future of warfare, and our leadership needs to get in front of it. Otherwise, we're fucked.
So they're saying that building an independent supply chain for rare earth metals could cost up to $20 billion and could take 5 or 10 years. The process is costly, technically challenging, energy intensive, and polluting. Because China makes a lot of aluminum, it's a byproduct of producing the aluminum. So they've been able to get some of these metals from producing iron ore, aluminum, copper, stuff like that. It's created a situation because of their strong support for commodities market, a situation where it's economically non-viable to produce these rare earth metals outside of China. Possible remedies would be swapping them out using a different mineral or different metal for the purpose in the chip, which is possible, or we could be recycling, or we could just build our own supplies. So what do you think? What do you think's going to happen with this, and how do you think it relates to World War III?
I don't think we'll do enough. I think we'll continue to rely on China because enough of our politicians are going to make money off of that, and enough of our politicians are just stupid and have their heads buried in the sand thinking that China is going to be our ally forever. So I don't think we're going to react. I don't think we're going to be proactive. I think we're going to get our butts kicked in the initial throw, and we're going to have to scramble and make up for it. And then again, as you've mentioned, if you said it's $20 billion to the total long-term cost, the grand scheme of the U.S. economy and the U.S. federal budget, which is I think $2 trillion annually, that's nothing. So if we cut off aid to Ukraine, guess what? We just funded the ability to lock down our entire rare earth supply chain. So opportunity cost of funding war in Ukraine or building American infrastructure. And again, you did mention the polluting cost.
It's not opportunity cost because you can do both. So
I don't think you can long-term.
Independent decisions.
Again, that's one of the fundamental assumptions. I think the United States needs to do a major transformation of the economy to being a deflationary, 0 to 1% deflationary economy. And until they do that, a lot of my ideas about reducing spending are invalid. So what I generally think is going to happen is we're going to continue to spend money because our congressmen and our politicians are in a prisoner's dilemma where there's no reason for them to stop spending money. And if they did stop spending money, they would not get reelected. So we're going to keep spending money. We're going to keep funding everything, like you suggested, until the U.S. has its economic collapse. And I'm not saying like every city is going to be burned down. My statement on an economic collapse in the United States is I believe over a 10-year period, we will have roughly 1,000% total inflation. So about 100%.
No, dude, you got to stop. Just make your point.
That's it. So I'm saying I think they're going to fund it. I think they're going to ignore all of my warnings. And the U.S. economy is going to...
You already said this, man.
I know. Just saying it again because you asked.
Don't hijack the articles into your economic diatribes.
Or World War III.
Next article is TSMC next gen chip for cell phones, etc. A 2 nanometer generation technology, N2, N2P, N2X chips, with the N2 chip supposedly supposed to go into production second half of 2025. Multiple innovations, including nanosheet gate all-around transistors, backside power delivery, and high-performance metal insulator shield, which I don't know what any of that stuff is, but sounds awesome. They have a huge engineering team because it requires new EDA software, which is electronic design automation. In order to design these chips, they have to use special software, kind of like Adobe Photoshop, I guess you could analogize it to, that allows them to design the chips. They also need to upgraded simulation, upgraded verification, and IP software associated with running these smaller chips. But these will be what is powering all of the new cell phones in the next, 5 years or so. And that's it. What do you think?
Again, I just want to bring it back to the United States. I want to bring production to the United States. And I'm in favor of short-term subsidies to make that happen.
Okay. Well, you want to subsidize it.
Short-term.
So Mason wants to subsidize chip production.
Which I'm normally against all subsidies, but in the short term with a temporary subsidy with a known expiration date, especially in this age of government stimulus spending, you got to do it. Until we have that rapid transformation or the total transformation to a deflationary economy, it's a good idea.
You want to do what we're already doing. Okay, interesting. So
I think it's a good plan.
China tech.
They need to do it faster.
Biden and the White House, this is Commerce Department, are tightening up these tech controls on China. They're using the Department of Commerce's authorities to control the export of technology, et cetera, to limit Chinese access to AI chips and these current generation and next generation and last generation chip making technologies, equipment, I said, coming from the Netherlands. They want to close loopholes such as overseas subsidiaries whereby indirect import of AI chips, et cetera, can go into China. And they have a case of this where the Chinese military used subsidiaries to buy AI chips which were then used to power their military nuclear simulations. And so I think this is good, but my question is, why the fuck weren't subsidiaries in the controls in the first place? And on top of that, why didn't the controls go into place well before they did?
We're being reactive. We're not proactive.
Obviously.
I guess it's just we're behind and we need to catch back up, and we're going to have to spend money to do that.
All right, so you want to spend money to close these loopholes. How does that work? There's another loophole whereby because anyone can go to AWS and rent GPUs in the cloud, AI chips in the cloud for this AI application, you can't do this with the cell phone chips because they have to put them in the cell phones. But if they just want to train AI, they can rent it over the internet, go in, train their model, download their model, bring that back to China, and they just used our chips somewhere in Virginia. Because there's no regulation like a know your customer law, like in the gambling industry or something like that, or in some other industries where financial transactions are happening, like securities and all that, then they would put this regulation in to whereby you would have to get verified before you could rent these AI chips and rent these cloud computers from AWS. They're trying to figure out how to do that. They're probably getting some lobbyists from AWS that don't want this to happen because AWS and these other cloud companies would have to implement this. And you think that probably going to hurt their business a little bit. I mean, if you still need the cloud, you're just going to go through verification, but it's probably going to slow things down marginally. And they don't want that. So there's probably some lobbyists in there that don't want this. They're trying to probably figure out how to do it, but hopefully they do it soon. Should have been done a long time ago. Got anything on the AI chips?
I mean, that's a smart workaround, like you said. But again, even if they legislate it, they'll probably find a way to work around that legislation. But probably should put that legislation in place to try and do your best to whatever they're doing to circumvent it. You just got to keep adapting the legislation to fix it.
The controls prevented NVIDIA, which is the top AI company in the world, from shipping the best AI chips to China, but they are allowed to sell less effective AI chips, the A800s. Even though these chips are purposely crippled compared to the regular chips, Chinese companies bought $1 billion worth of them from NVIDIA in 2023, and they've already got orders for 4 billion of these chips in 2024, whereby you don't have the most advanced AI chips, but you still have AI chips. So maybe you just use twice as many of them to get the same amount of work done, or whatever you have to do, you still have like some kind of AI chip. Because when they're running these things, they wear out. It's not like you get an AI chip and it's going to last forever, right? Like, especially if you're running in at full horsepower, eventually it's going to wear down and you're going to need new chips. We know this from Bitcoin mining, stuff like that. They're going to need a constant supply of these, right?
It's demand for our U.S. companies as we ramp up our own production, I guess.
Well, these are produced by a foreign company in China using our...
Right. So what I'm saying is, as we do this, bringing the chip production into the United States, make it so that the only way they can get it is if they buy it from... Here's an easy solution. The only way that they can buy it is if they buy it from these new companies that we're standing up, so that then, in a sense, China becomes a subsidy paying for the creation of the new capability and the new manufacturing capacity of the United States.
Well, we've got them by the balls because we got the chip making equipment. They've got us by the balls because they've got the rare earth metals. So it's like a Mexican knife fight, or like a knife fight where you're handcuffed together with their other hands or something like that. I mean, we've just got everything pointed at each other, and it's going to disrupt everything. If the antagonism gets too high, it's going to affect the entire economy. The entire world recession could happen. There could be all types of bullshit happening. So
it probably will happen once China feels strong enough.
Something is going to happen. Hopefully it's not so terrible.
You said this in the past when we talked about China. Like, the strategy of guerrilla operations, the strategy of Mao, right, is create a stalemate, wait until you're strong enough to win, then win. Right now, they're in that strategy of waiting until they're strong enough. Once they are, they're going to fight.
Yeah. If you're a guerrilla, you start off on the strategic defensive, you move into basically a stalemate, and then eventually your guerrilla army transitions into the strategic offensive, whereby your guerrillas start forming what look like regular military units, and then those are the ones that march into the city like the Taliban. These books and these ideas were developed in China. These books have Mao's name on them. I've read a biography of Mao, and I've read the books, and I don't think he wrote them. I think there were some brilliant Chinese men or some brilliant Chinese officers at that time that kind of put these things together, and their names will never be known because Mao wanted to take credit for it. And so it's his book because he's the smartest person in the country, right? And he won the war and everything. So it was assimilated by him. So I don't really know who made it, but these are brilliant ideas of resistance that beat us in Vietnam. It beat the French in Algeria. I mean,
beat us in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, just guerrilla warfare is a powerful tactic, and in a lot of ways, if you don't care about living or dying, it's a superior form of warfare and very, very effective, especially if you add that suicide element to it, which these days resistance always comes with this, suicidal flair to it. Air Force cancel culture Air Force Reserve Officer Major Jace Yarbrough, and I've heard that name before on the news and stuff like that, suing the Air Force and the Space Force because he's Air Force Reserve, but serving assigned to the Space Force, one of these egghead motherfuckers. You got a letter of admonishment, which is pretty low punishment, essentially slap on the wrist, I assume. Not for an officer. Not for an officer. It's probably like not great, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not like they took his rank or some shit.
It's nothing.
August 2021, remarks as a civilian at a private retirement ceremony, but it's a military ceremony, but private.
And he was in uniform.
But he was in uniform as a civilian, which is,
not a thing.
He wasn't setting this up. I mean, this guy did he have too much to drink? I feel like, what the fuck are you thinking, dude? But I mean, you didn't even get in trouble anyway, but he wants to be a fucking dick about it. He went to the ceremony at his own expense. He wore his uniform as a civilian. A Navy member who was there filed a complaint saying that his comments were insubordinate, disrespectful, unbecoming of an officer. He got the letter of admonishment. They had to do something, right? Because of all this shit he was talking a lot of shit. Hopefully, good thing it wasn't recorded. They got witnesses that were there, though, to corroborate what he said. He had 4 appeals denied. The last one was the chief of staff of the Air Force. He has gotten no rationale of why his appeals are being denied, so he's suing them now because he can't just fucking let it go. I think if he wasn't in uniform, like, okay, maybe he's a little drunk, but you got your fucking uniform on, and you're an officer. You're not like some sergeant.
You're not an E1.
He's like popping off or whatever. Like,
he's a major. I think he's a major, right? And he's a lawyer. Like, I looked him up. He studied law. Like, he should know better.
Obviously an asshole.
Like, he doesn't understand UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And when you're a military member, you give up your freedom of speech. That is a component of it. You give up a lot of freedoms when you're in the military, when you're especially active. So he's an officer. He's expected to lead and carry out the commands of his leadership, the President of the United States, and he's going against that. The punishment is just a letter of admonishment, which is absolutely nothing. As you mentioned, his 4 appeals have been rejected. It went to I think it went up to the 4-star of Space Command and got rejected. In addition, if he wanted to do it administratively the right way, you are allowed to fight a letter of admonishment through the court-martial system. So I'm guessing if we dove into all of the details of this, he probably accepted the letter of admonishment, signed it without protest, and then he started to appeal it, right? What he should have done is request trial by court-martial, except he chose not to do that. And then he's being a bitch on the outside world by sending these 4 appeals and not going outside. Like, all this because of an LOA, which is nothing. I mean, this guy sounds like someone I would never want to be around. I would never want to meet this guy.
Yeah, this guy's obviously not focused on the military mission, his military, whatever the fuck his job is. It says the LOA condemns specific remarks, including his references to radical political factions, how the military is fostering a culture of incompetence and cowardice, and DoD-wide extremism training is a thinly veiled flex of political power. He warned the totalizing claims of a radical political faction within our wider culture have broken into our military, and that the faction uses cancel culture. Ordinary Americans, including our airmen, are at risk of losing their livelihoods for saying things that until yesterday were matters of basic common sense and wisdom. Things like men can't birth babies, boys should not be allowed in girls' locker room. It's this like gender stuff that everybody is all pissed off about. I mean, he's got like a quote from Candle in the Wind. I mean, I thought this guy was like maybe drank too much. It was popping off. That's like, I'm from the NCO world, so that's what I would imagine. But in the Ranger world,
I agree with his message. Like, we need to be more lethal. We need to not be focusing on sexuality in the military. Like, you're allowed to be here. Great, cool. Lock it up. I don't give a fuck about your sexuality. Are you lethal? Do you add capability to the warfighter? Great. That's all I care about. Unfortunately, he's probably somewhat right in some of his statements, but his methodology, the way he's going about it, is wrong. And you don't change it by screaming and yelling, which is all this guy's doing.
Okay, they say members were offended by the guest speaker's comments. There were inappropriate comments made by the guest speaker at the subject event targeted at the LGBT community and other political issues currently taking place in our country. I think that's the bathroom stuff and everything.
What he said is his opinion, and he didn't say anything too offensive. I will say especially the transgender issue right now is like just a hotbed. Like, you say,
it's just the same stuff they say on TV. Let's be real. I mean, this is just on TV every night. He's just repeating what he sees on TV.
I'm working on stand-up comedy right now, and I have a transgender joke that I'm kind of working on.
Please do not tell it there.
I'm not going to tell it here. But the first time I practiced it when I was in stand-up comedy class, I was talking about Dylan Mulvaney as an example of American exceptionalism because Dylan Mulvaney is allowed to pursue happiness in America and would be stoned to death in at least like 50 countries. So Dylan Mulvaney is an example of progress, American exceptionalism, American tolerance, and American greatness. Somebody took that statement and said, you didn't use the right gender. I'd never used a gender. I made a point to just say Dylan Mulvaney's name. But that became a fight in comedy where I'm purely defending Dylan Mulvaney, and they still found a reason to attack me. Now, what this person said is actually a little bit anti-trans, even though I agree with it. But I can see why they'd be outraged because that community has been taught that they are untouchable, that they are a special protected class, and no one can go after them. And again, I think we need transgender people should be allowed in the military. They should be allowed to fight as long as what they're doing is adding value to the fight, not adding a distraction to the fight. Because right now it seems like a lot of it is just a distraction.
Well, for the older generation, it's not as palatable. I think the younger generation is more palatable for them. So in the military, so I think it's trending in that direction. I mean, this is a very small minority of people. It's not going to swing the balance of wars and stuff. It's kind of like a fairness issue and how we want to organize the military, let people in. I think basically that anybody should be allowed to join the military, even if you're disabled or anything like that, because in my view, the military is not the same organization as like everybody can fight World War II type thing. I think it can be older people. I think it could even be teenagers. I mean, not like shooting and stuff like that, but like doing computer stuff and this and that. I think it could be a lot of things. I think there's a lot of different ways that Americans could interact with the military. They don't all need to be able to fight like Ranger, charge the machine gun nest on top of the hill type stuff.
You have contracting for that.
There's a lot of intel jobs and stuff that people just sit in a chair basically. You know, there's a lot of hospital jobs. There's a lot of jobs that are going to be using the brain.
But you can use contracting to get those people to be a part of the total force. You don't necessarily have to be active duty.
Some people have to be in uniform, Mason.
Yeah, but those are the people that meet all the standards. Those are the people that are physically fit, mentally fit.
What's the standard? The standard doesn't mean anything. I mean, it doesn't. None of these people are going to fight. None of these people are going to deploy. They're not going to fight. Okay,
And even then, I never had to do a push-up, right? Like I was never.
You've never done a push-up.
I'm saying in my freaking military career, like being able to do a push-up did not help me. But I can do push-ups. Right, that's what I'm saying. So I'm agreeing with you, John. I'm saying that, yeah, we could get these guys in any other, we need a total force, but I think contracting is the way you get somebody who has question marks into the force.
Well, it's stupid to say, like, you have to be able to do 42 push-ups or whatever. I mean, it's an ideal that, yes, we all have to maintain some physical standard for ourselves, you know, so we can all support each other on the battlefield or whatever it is that we're doing. But, like, if somebody else is in a different situation, depending on their job, I mean, this is all dependent on jobs. There's so many different jobs.
Correct.
You know I mean, these people can come in, and I personally think if I really felt compelled to join the military when I was young because the country got attacked or because I was just wanted to be a military person or do some certain job in the military and I was disabled or I was trans or something like that, and that I was just blocked off from that like the gay men used to be, then it would really like leave a hole in my actualization of my life. Like as looking back on my life being like, shit, I never could be in the U.S. military. I could never serve one day with those guys because of what I was doing on the weekend or whatever, or how I was born. And I think there's a job where they can do it. Like just give them a fucking uniform. Like it doesn't make the Rangers any less legal, or the Navy SEALs are still going to know how to swim just because there's like a trans guy working at the motor pool or whatever. And no one fucking cares, you know? I mean, we have to settle these issues.
Well, I'm saying like if somebody's physically disabled, I disagree because what's going to happen, I mean, maybe it wasn't an issue for Rangers in deployments, but in the Air Force, guys were inventing injuries to avoid going downrange. And so then you have a couple of people that are physically capable that get to go on multiple deployments and guys who are just as capable, but they use the excuse not to go downrange. And the result is like that crushes the force because the good warfighters get out while the guys who make excuses just get paid and stay home. So like,
but then you got people who want to deploy who can't deploy because no one will give them the opportunity. It's just all ass backwards of like this command and control system. People have to voluntarily want to do these military missions. This whole, I'm going to order you here, order you there. I got you for 4 years. I got you for 6 years, got you for 20. It's bullshit. This is not how to motivate people and lead people and put people in places where they're actualized so they can do like an exceptional job. And we need to select the leaders that can enable that. And none of this is happening.
The active duty military should be the elite of the elite. And it should be physically fit, mentally fit, and fit in every way, capable of domestic intelligence operations, as in like staying home and being smart.
They should be as fit as they can be for who they are.
I think you use the contractors to augment the force with people who are not fully capable.
All right. You're just saying the same thing over again. So
Because we're disagreeing.
talking about hypersonics, we've not been super successful or really successful at all in hypersonics. We know that described even by Milley, her general, as a almost Sputnik moment. He didn't say it was Sputnik. He cannot say something like that because he's a leader of the military, but I will say it was I will also say it was near a Sputnik moment. Sputnik freaked out America more, and not as many people saw this, but for military people, it was Sputnik moment. So let's like define it down to that. It wasn't a Sputnik moment, for people who don't care about the military. We've got two cruise missiles under development. There's probably some of the bigger missiles under development by DARPA. I'm not exactly tracking where all those are. They're probably classified anyway, so we don't really know right now. But these cruise missiles are nearing in a production phase. We've been tracking them through the last show and into this show as well. Reports coming out now basically are saying that the hypersonics supply chain is immature and that we are essentially not ready to build these weapons, even though we need them. And Russia has them, and Russia's been using them. And China obviously has them because they lapped the world twice and disconnected a payload in hypersonic flight, which basically they didn't think was possible, or obviously it's probably possible, but they didn't think that anyone had that capability. I mean, we are probably really behind on these hypersonics. What do you think, Mason? This is our Air Force, right?
Hypersonics are the future of warfare. It's essential for us to be able to both project force with hypersonic missiles as well as to defend against them. I thought this article was mostly about supply chain, and kind of going back to our earlier discussion, I think we need to subsidize the entire construction of hypersonics. And as you mentioned, China owns the current inputs or sources materials, at least for chips. I'm not sure about hypersonics, but whatever it is, we need to both lock down our input for the capability and have it be diverse. It cannot just be one single source because so first we need to get one source that's reliable but you need to have multiple sources. Otherwise we're just creating a strategic vulnerability for ourselves.
With the chips, our response to the CHIPS Act, all that, and solving hypersonics and solving the rare earth metals things, you want to throw money at the problem. You also say the national debt is our biggest problem. So you don't want to spend any money, but you want to spend money on all three of these things. You don't want to send any money to Israel. You don't want to send any money to Ukraine.
My economic clarification is as long as we are doing this debt spending strategy, which has been Congress's strategy for a very long time, my entire life, they need to be spending money in the right places. However, I think we do need a radical transformation of the entire economy to a 0 to 1% deflationary economy. But until they do that, they should spend the fuck out of money to secure our supply chain. But I do believe the economic collapse, again, a couple 100% inflation annually for several years is coming, as long as the spending occurs.
If it turns out that they have enough money to do some of these things, they haven't started on the rare earth metals. For a lot of these things, like the chips, if we have provided enough money, if the Congress has provided enough money, it's not a money issue, and we're still failing, then what's going on? What do you think?
Bad leadership. At that point, you need to get a general in charge of that program that...
I think a general is already in charge of it. Maybe that's the problem.
They need to fire that general and get a better general. That's what I'm saying.
Do something different.
If they've been funding a command, a general, to get something done, and that general has not accomplished that objective in 2 years, however long, fire that general and get somebody in there who will.
So they're saying that there's specialized sub-applications, like aspects of hypersonic missile development, flight, all that, such as high temperature applications that are immature, and they are the underpinnings of what is necessary in order to develop and produce these type of weapons. We have a small industrial base, and we've been suffering from just-in-time production, which is the idea that you wait to order something until the last minute before you need it because you're essentially assuming that it will be delivered by the vendor on time. We have basically two of these programs, the Army one, which I think is the Arrow, ARRW missile, and that one has been a big failure. That was the one that hasn't been launching off the platform. They can't get it to ignite. Other issues. You can just tell from the press releases that it's not going well. Failed tests all over the place. And missile tests do fail, but I would like to see it get into flight. Personally, the more successful one is the LRHW long-range hypersonic weapon, which looks pretty nice, about the size of a cruise missile, a little bit bigger than a regular cruise missile, I would think. And that is a joint project with the Air Force and Navy. Obviously the Navy has different applications on their missile cruisers, and the Air Force would drop it out of a plane or something like that. And they're supposed to start fielding it by the end of 2023.
So
they were
next
supposed
week?
to field it. They were supposed to field it end of fiscal year 2023, which is October. Had to push it back a little bit, but supposedly they're saying it's coming up by the end of the year. So it'll go into some kind of testing phase or something. So what do you think? At least we got one, right? right?
At least we got one that's working, yeah. And I think our capability is probably far more advanced than we're letting off, because my understanding is we've defended against hypersonics in Russia successfully.
The upgrades that we did that on the show, the upgrade to the Patriot missile system, which is a legacy system, but has been upgraded with more better risk sensors and everything, they were able to shoot down one of these Russian missiles. Maybe the Russian missile wasn't performing up to spec, or maybe they overblown it or whatever, but they shot down one. And so it's good. We have some kind of protection. Like if we get into a fight, we can put up some Patriots and we got something to start from. So you're right. Yeah.
That's it. I think we're just in the right place. Again, as I said before, we got to lock down the supply chain, got to lock down the production capability, got to create it as a strategic asset instead of a strategic risk. That should be the goal for everything in the every single one of these things. Should be the same mantra. Right now, it's a strategic risk. We need to turn it into a strategic strength.
Ideally, yes. And we get the defense as well.
Yeah. And on top of that, when you create a strategic strength out of it, what are you doing? You're investing in the U.S. economy at the same time. And this is why every single politician is so fucking stupid, because they keep sending money overseas, which is just a money sink, instead of investing in American infrastructure that is also going to create a strategic strength and eventually an export system in the future. That's why our entire political economy is just stupid right now, in my opinion.
DoD replicator, we've been talking about. Shield AI has a prototype of a autonomous drone that can essentially do drone swarms, and they're planning on getting this ready to become one of the prototypes or be involved in the DoD replicator program, which we've talked about pretty much every week under the Defense Innovation Group. It's a major contract to build affordable mass networkable drones. We talked about them about 500-mile range, kind of medium-sized guys, about the size of a small cruise missile. I was looking at them online earlier. They have their AI pilot system is called HiveMind. They have teams of 4 right now. So as the AI becomes more sophisticated, as their product and their technology becomes more sophisticated, it will go to 4 to 8. It will go from 8 to 16 and so on and so forth, so that we can build up this coordinated AI drone armada that can attack and do different missions. This is different than the drones now, which essentially you jam them and they either crash or they lose contact or something like that. These would essentially be able to think for themselves, and it's going to be very much harder to stop them, especially when they're in a drone swarm. They also, obviously, like I said, we want affordable mass. They want to be able to produce lots and lots and lots of these. So they have to be designed to be produced and manufactured quickly and for not too much money, after all we've learned in Ukraine. What do you think about the VBAT teams, the Shield AI drones, Mason, and the AI?
I think this is the future. I'm going to go on a rant for a little bit, because I think drones are amazing. It's always been my thing. AI, I always love as well. So, but first off, I don't think this is true AI. I think this is an algorithm. Known outputs. And the difference between an algorithm and AI, an algorithm has known outputs and AI has unknown outputs. So, in my opinion, this is still just an algorithm. It's a really cool algorithm.
Wait, what did you say? Say that again?
Okay. In my opinion, an algorithm has known outputs. AI has unknown outputs.
What do you mean by unknown outputs? You mean it's a black box?
No, I mean it could do something that we have never anticipated. An unknown output is an unanticipated outcome.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
that's the distinction between AI and an algorithm.
Yeah, more likely to, yes.
And right now, these are just algorithms. It's a really cool algorithm, but it's just a buzzword thing that I like to point out. The HiveMind is cool. It's a central repository. I mean, it's just like what you're talking about. If you've seen like any of the Independence Day movies, that's kind of the HiveMind, right? It's a really cool idea. It's the future. And so one of my dreams is to use a HiveMind type drone to do humanitarian operations.
HiveMind's the AI. That's
right. So
that's controlling
all the drones. So I would like to use either pilot control drones or a HiveMind controlling a bunch of micro drones.
You can't do pilot control, because if they jam them, then the pilot will lose connection. You need the AI.
I understand. So I'm saying this is my vision for a program for humanitarian aid, where let's say we're feeding people in Yemen that are starving, or let's say there's Gaza right now, people need water. Instead of putting boots on the ground, let's send some drones in and just drop a drone that goes in, lands, leaves water, flies away. And it's like a big sign that says like, thanks, like, this is from America. This would be good PR. And the reason why I was saying piloted is just to make sure that we have total control and that we can film it better, and like just for the PR component. So it's not because of effectiveness we'd want to pilot, it's for the public relations component we would want to pilot, so that the pilot could talk about that mission. Whereas if you're using an algorithm to control it, you don't have that pilot that can go on CNN and say like, this is what I did. So again, it's about the total concept of information operations combined with the drone operations when I'm talking about having a pilot. It's not because of effectiveness in the completing the mission. It's just for the PR component, the information component of the military campaign. What's cool is the algorithm could be used to deliver water to the needy, or it can be used to deliver ordnance to the people that need to die. And that same algorithm can do both. And that's what's so exciting for this. Also so fucking terrifying. Because again, if like it gets in the wrong hands, that algorithm can quickly be used to disseminate death.
Yeah, you would still need the weapons. Not the algorithm's not killing; it's the weapons that are killing, but they're being controlled by the algorithm.
Okay, how
by the AI model, not the algorithm.
Okay, but like let's say you've got a 5-pound drone, like a drone that weighs 5 pounds total. You don't even need a munition system. If you just kamikaze and you slam somebody right in the face, like you have it programmed to go as fast as possible, 200 miles an hour. That 5-pound drone just hits somebody as hard as they can, right in the temple, not in the temple, right in the bridge of the nose. That's probably gonna kill them.
I mean, yeah, you're talking about like kinetic. I think you would be almost always better off if you had some kind of explosive payload on it.
I agree. I'm just saying,
just like a sucker punch in the face or something.
Oh, just put a little like spear at the tip of it. Like
I mean, maybe for like a special operations mission or something where you're like knocking out some scientists and you want to take them away because you got the nuclear, some CIA thing. You want to get the nuclear.
Right. All I'm saying is you don't necessarily have to have C4 attached to it to kill somebody. You don't have to have a bullet. You could use a drone.
You can use a drone for a lot of things, man.
To kill somebody and be like less than $1,000 per kill.
I'm interested in this issue of the RISC-V framework, which is a chipset which is being described as the backbone for advanced chips and semiconductors. The company that I believe produced this is providing it royalty-free as part of their business model, like open source. It is this open source framework that is allowing China skirt controls because they don't have to register with the competitor who has a proprietary product, I assume. I think is how this is working. So Marco Rubio and Mark Warner, two senators, want to pass a law essentially that would prevent this open source framework, which the Chinese are using to design their chips, because they're trying to build up their chips too, kind of helping them. But people and entrepreneurs on the other side are saying that a ban on this open source framework would slow innovation. I'm not super familiar with this, but I did think it was an important issue because it relates with the chips. And it's another way that these senators are coming in to try to hamper the progress of China in building their domestic chip industry, because they can't really do anything to us except the germanium and the gallium, like we just talked about earlier, rare earth metals. What do you think?
So it goes back to something you've said to me previously that I didn't agree with at first, but you changed my perspective. And it's that politics is really the front line of warfare in a lot of ways. And so this is the current front line of World War III, is resource access and resource control and capability access. I agree with these senators. Again, we need to pay that price. Let's blockade it. As I've said, I'm going to say this is kind of like the mantra. Reduce the enemy's capability to produce. Create the production capability in the United States. That's it. Turn a strategic risk into a strategic strength. That needs to be our mantra as a military for the next 20 years. Whatever our weakness is, whatever we're reliant on someone else for, we need to bring back to the United States and take total control of it. So yeah, there's going to be times when we need to have stuff mined from somewhere. Well, in that case, we need to find a way to make sure that source of materials is as stable as humanly possible. I mean, if it means having a destroyer every mile all the way across to obviously it's not possible, but like I'm saying, like if we need to have a destroyer every mile all the way across the ocean to protect our ships, do it. Like that needs to be, we need to spend the money. We're doing,
spending more money, Mason? How much money do you want to spend, Mason?
Until the U.S. economy transitions to a non-surplus or a non-deficit spending economy that is an inflationary economy, which is what we're currently a deficit spending inflationary economy. Until we transition to a stable 0 to 1% deflationary economy, we need to spend the money that we have to create that strategic advantage. Okay. But again, that's about government strength. It's not about citizen strength.
All right.
It degrades the citizen every time they do it.
Okay. So I think that what's got you interested here and what's happening, what we're seeing, is the lead up to the first conflict ever between two information age militaries. And so in order to supply these militaries with the advanced technology necessary to fight the first ever inter-information age military battles and war and theater campaigns and all that stuff out into space and everything, we're going to need these chips. We're going to need the raw materials, the supply chain, and it's going to have to be protected because the war might last for a long time. We need a lot of these drones and all this stuff. So this just hasn't happened before. And hopefully it doesn't happen. We don't want to fight them and it would be terrible for the world. But if these two militaries fight, it could be two very advanced militaries. So we're going from dirt huts in Afghanistan to fighting the second most advanced military in the world right now. So, I mean, this is just like the course of history right now.
But it's still no real different than World War II. There was entire bombing campaigns dedicated to degrading Germany's ball bearing production capability. We're still going to probably need ball bearings, but we're also going to need all these other rare earth minerals that nobody gave a fuck about in the past. The advanced warfighting capability, the lethality of these advanced tools creates a new supply chain risk, a new supply chain imperative that did not exist in past wars.
Australia's done a bunch of studies. Our ally, Australia, obviously, our biggest ally in Asia Pacific, and has serious military. We're going to need them if we're going to operate out there. They have major trade with China. They've tried to think about how they could possibly decouple from China, and they can't. I personally don't think we can either, and I don't think China can decouple from us.
That's just stupid.
I think we're just in too deep with everybody, and we just have to figure it out. Otherwise,
what's going to happen?
Everybody's quality of life is going to degrade.
Well, yeah. So,
and the environment's going to get all fucked up, and all this bad shit's going to happen if people can't get along, and if these defense industry people get their way. So that we piss off China by sending all this stuff to Taiwan, and they'll try to get us into something there, and so they get some more contracts and everything.
Australia. The fact that they publish this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I would say they're the third step in Chinese imperialism. Like, you first got Taiwan, then you got Japan, then you got Australia, probably. So that'd be my guess.
You think they're going to invade Australia?
No, I'm not. Well, maybe in 50 years when World War III really...
They're not going to invade other countries.
World War III time, we're talking. But when World War III kicks off, Taiwan is probably the first domino for the Chinese theater. Japan would probably be the second domino. Maybe a Western front component like the Russians or India would be maybe a third front, but I would say Australia would be far more likely. Just as a hypothetical, Australia, if they want any chance to survive, they need to prepare for that decoupling. Because what's going to happen, the first thing when the hostilities kick off is there's going to be a embargo, blockade of some kind, and whatever Australia's become dependent on China for, they're not going to have. What they're actually saying is these people don't understand how to think, because there is the possibility of decoupling from Australia. What they're saying is they're just not willing to pay that price. I don't know what that price is, but they need to start bringing domestic, like production on farmland. They need the first step they should have is be able to feed all of their own people.
Look, Australia is a commodities exporter. They're exporting iron ore, liquid natural gas, and agricultural products mostly to China. The issue is if they decouple from China, they lose the Chinese market. They will have economic hardship because they will have to probably not make as much money on their major exports because China is basically their biggest trading partner. Some people think that these commodities will go out onto the world market. There'll be some kind of hit or whatever, but apparently they've done 3 internal studies over the last 8 years, and every single one of them said that it is impossible for them to find someone else to buy this much of their shit because China's buying so much of it.
I mean, they'd have to compete on a global market and find new sources of...
Well, they're commodities, so you could sell them on an exchange, theoretically. But, they're just gonna... if it has to travel further or they don't get as good of a price or something...
Yeah, they'll have to lose, but it's still not impossible. It's just they're not willing to pay the price because they are so stupid that they don't even understand what the real price is of failure. And the real prices of failure is the loss of their country.
Cool. Army General, you actually sent me this. The Army General who was on TikTok and all over the place because he was essentially down talking on the soldiers and stuff over the barracks issues. And we've been talking about the barracks on here. We all know about the barracks. I mean, I guess the enlisted cadre of Real Veteran News knows about the barracks for the most part. I think I definitely do. So he's on this panel and there's a question about the barracks, which in the mold and stuff like that. Another general answered first, General Omar Jones IV. Then this other general that had the offensive answer is Major General James P. Eisenhower III. This is an out-of-touch general. General Jones was basically just gave a bland answer, really smart, not stepping on landmines. General Eisenhower wanted to make a splash and says...
He went full boomer. Full boomer.
I do use this in a pejorative term, and it's adulting. But a lot of times we just need to teach young soldiers and young family members what is appropriate and what is part of their obligation and basic responsibility as an adult. I've got it good at Fort Hood compared to Fort Stewart or Fort Liberty, where mold really isn't a problem for us. And I will tell senior leaders, I don't have a mold problem, I have a discipline problem. Because just the lack of humidity, we're not under the same conditions. We have had some mold problems, but that's from leaky pipes we didn't discover until it was too late, and there's a quick way to fix it, it's acute. But at the end of the day, we still have young men and women who will call a hotline and say, I have black mold in my shower. And it's on the grout. It's because they haven't cleaned it.
I mean, he's just so out of touch, which feeds into the stereotype that they're out of touch. He says, I don't have a mold problem. I have a discipline problem, which doesn't really make sense. I mean, yeah, there's some places that they don't clean up or whatever like that. But I mean, I know in our barracks, it was clean. We cleaned it all the time.
Every day.
Basically. And
we had room inspections every day.
It's in the building. You know what I mean? We don't have, as the soldiers, we don't have control of this stuff like that. And this guy's never spent one night in a barracks, maybe for like Ranger School or something like that. But those aren't real barracks. It's like a training situation.
Think he went to Ranger School?
He's an infantry officer. He had to go to Ranger School. So
I would just say, I'm surprised you didn't check.
I mean, he's an infantry officer. He had to go to Ranger School.
Okay.
He's at Fort Hood and in Texas, and the air is dry. So they don't really have as big of a mold problem as some of the other posts. So he's just tone deaf, and he says, like, I don't have this big problem. Other bases have it worse. He thinks that kind of like sets him up to say his little piece that he has to say. But he's got this problem. He brings up a situation where young soldiers call up the base or call up whoever, maintenance, and they say, I have black mold in my whatever. And they come out and it's like mildew. It's like in their shower, on the floor or something like that. It's within their domain to clean it up, right? Because the young people might not understand exactly the situation. They might just be leaving home for the first time or whatever. They don't understand that it's not like a building issue. It's like a cleaning thing. Now, I get, yes, there's going to be some percentages of soldiers that are, dummies or whatever, and they have some mold in their shower and they call the base and like you get smoked up or like you look like an asshole at work, you get embarrassed or something like that. But I mean, this is just young people shit. He says, I do use this in a pejorative term and it's adulting, which we know it's like a Gen Z slang term that's kind of new. And he gives this and he says that they basically need to take care of our own barracks and stuff like that. Even though we know that the living situations across the military have been pretty bad, especially in situations in the Navy, but he's not responsible for the Navy. He's only thinking about the military. He's focused and he's talking about his post, but it comes off sounding like he's talking about everything and everybody. And he just sounds like a dick, and then he is a dick. And he's, they should be fired immediately. If he has a boss, I don't even know how high he is up. Whoever's in charge of this motherfucker should take away his BAH and make him fucking live in the barracks for 6 months. And you shouldn't be allowed to retire either. Because that's what he's going to do. He's going to be like, say in a week, and he's like, fuck this, I retire.
On that note, agreeing with you, he talked about like, oh, well, I don't have this. Okay, great. You don't have that issue in Fort Hood because it's dry there. It's harder for mold to grow there. Not because of your leadership, number one. Any of these guys that are letting their soldiers live in squalor should be reassigned to a frozen tundra where they don't have to deal with mold. And guess what? It won't be a problem for them. And then you should put somebody in their place that cares about their fucking troops. Because the only thing that matters is, are your troops capable of fighting? And if you're giving your troops subpar living conditions, they're not going to be as able to fight.
Well, okay, hold on. I mean, yeah, it's not great for morale. The Viet Cong are living on like a bag of rice and like they got flip-flops barefoot. Like soldiers don't need the 4 seasons, okay?
But when you're an E2, you need to have...
In America, we expect them to be safe and not have the mold and shit.
The E2 needs to be worrying about going through their advanced individual training, not worrying about if it's safe for them to breathe the air when they get back to their dorm room. All right? So, yeah, sorry. How did it get this bad in the first place? Like, do they not have dorm inspections daily? Like, how did it allow to degrade at this point?
Man.
Right, I'm getting there. The second one is, what's the maintenance budget for each of these bases? And I would like to look into how that's being allocated and not, like, if it's black mold, the average E2 shouldn't be responsible for gutting out the black mold and putting in new drywall. Like, I'm sorry, that's just a little bit beyond personal responsibility for your barracks. The final thing is, in the article it talked about how they've been contracting out the maintenance budget. Like, it said that there were third-party contractors that were responsible for maintenance of these locations, and they were failing. So those contractors, whoever gave them the contract, should be probably looked into, because it was probably given to a buddy. It was probably like given to a local...
It's always given to a buddy.
It's probably like a lieutenant colonel that retired in the local area, and they gave it to that person and that person. So first, they need to revisit that entire maintenance contract and immediately fire the current person providing it and hire someone new. And two, the higher headquarters army needs to adjust some of the end-of-year funding as the fiscal year comes to a close now, and give some additional funding to these locations for upgrading the infrastructure. And then the final thought is, as I mentioned, is what's the total maintenance on the facilities? How do they not have like a rotational component? You have all your barracks facilities. There should be one that's under full retrofit every like 20 years. And like, so you just rotate like, oh, this one's getting modernized this year. This one's getting modernized next year. And then you just do a loop. And then by the time you get back around to the end of the loop, it's probably time to modernize the one that you started with.
Because all the facilities people suck ass, right, man. You've been on military bases, they're worthless.
Actually, mine were pretty nice. The Air Force is good.
I mean, they're nice. Of course they're nice. They're happy because they have this job where they don't do anything. No one's taking care of the kids. And now no one wants to join the the military. The system's breaking down. The leaders are failing. Nobody's
Yes.
holding these civilians accountable. Something needs to change. And there needs to be a mea culpa to the young generation and be like, we disrespected you. We'd like you to reconsider joining the military. We have made these changes. You can live in this nice barracks or whatever. Or just let them live off post. Like, fuck the barracks. This is so stupid.
Well, an E2's got to be living on post for the most part. Like,
If an E2 is married, he's not living on post.
okay, true. But and sometimes they are. But here's the thing. Like, again, the commander needs to be fired, and they need to hire a commander whose goal, like if you're the commander and you're not even the general, right? Like there's a commander there whose only job, like some major, maybe a light colonel, their only job is the living facilities. Like they're the living facility commander. There's somebody there who that's their fucking job. And that person also needs to be canned. And we need to hire people in those positions who care about people. If you're the asshole
Good
Army
luck.
lieutenant colonel who just says, fuck you guys all, follow my orders and bear your hardship with a smile, that's not the person you need in a support role.
Of course, yes. The people suck.
This is a pure failure of military leadership.
Of course, the system's failing. It's not any one person.
Oh, that
It's
general
not any
could
one
have fixed
person.
his base and chose not to fix his base.
It's a culture. It's priorities.
If you put me in charge of that base, I would probably change all the priorities of that base and get this problem solved.
You're a younger person. You're from a different generation. The generation is out of touch. The difference between the young military age and the old military age, the leaders, the commanders, the generals, blah, 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 is too far apart. It needs to come closer together.
And so what's the actual commander's job in the modern military? It's not to kick down doors. It's not to be the ultimate warfighter. The job of a military commander in the United States military in the modern world is to create the environment that the enlisted troops can maximize their capabilities. That is your only fucking job. Clearly, like one of the main components of enabling enlisted to maximize their capabilities is good living conditions, a place where they can come back to and relax. And a place like this where not only do they come back and like they're possibly being put, like some soldier in Texas is facing might be his dorm room, like the black mold polluting their lungs.
I might die I came back from Afghanistan. I came back from Iraq. I might die because I had black mold in my barracks room in 2007. Like, what the fuck? Like, this is how I'm going to go down? I'm an American warrior.
That is the only job of a commander. You're not kicking down doors. You're not going, unless you're in the Air Force, like our majors are dropping bombs, right? But like for the most part, a military commander their job is to protect the troops and enable the troops, and that is all. And if you do that, you'll be the most successful commander possible.
We can't reduce leadership down too much. It is obviously leadership failure, but it's systemic. It's not just replace the leaders. You just get another idiot. The person you replaced might be worse than the person you replaced.
You got to hand select them at this point.
Across everything. I mean, the system needs to be able to select leaders itself. This can't
True.
be just one person like, oh, this is a good person, that's a good person, whatever. I mean, that's the old boys club. And it's eventually will break down because it gets corrupted over time. UFOs. I want to touch on UFOs. We haven't talked about UFOs at all and the whole military issue of the UFOs since started the new show up and been rolling here. I want to talk about UFOs. So we know that right before we started the RVN, David Grush, whistleblower, used to work in the government, kind of adjacent to one of these top secret UFO cover-up units or unit or whatever, however they do it. He first contacted a journalist named Ross Coulthart, who has been investigating. What I picked up here on the news is that this journalist, Ross, is talking about how crazy and bloody and murderous the history of military-led UFO cover-up situation in America over the last 80 to 90 years. That's what we're looking at here. This is the biggest cover-up in the history of the world and obviously in the history of the United States. And it's been going on for a very, very long time. He's basically saying that he's corroborating what David has said. He's got other sources and everything, but the most kind of outlandish stuff, he really can't put out there because of his journalistic standards. With these serious journalists will not tell you something unless they can independently verify it from multiple sources. And there's different levels of journalists. Someone who's just taking one thing from one source and repeating it essentially is just a gossip artist. And so journalists don't like that. So he's basically saying, I can't tell you all this stuff, but in broad strokes, he's painting the picture of this cover-up as something that is murderous, to where the government has killed innocent Americans in the course of maintaining the secret of this cover-up. And I hope that isn't true or however it worked, but I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if it is true. And obviously we're going to have to do some national reconciliation with this. We're going to find out who these people were killed. We're going to figure out what happened, who did it, and set the record straight. And who knows when the last time, when's the last time they killed someone to keep the UFOs secret? I don't know. When did this end? Who was in charge? Who made these decisions? Did it go up to the president? Which president? Did it go across all the presidents? Were any of the presidents briefed? Someone needs to crack this coconut. But what I found in this, government killing people, the government kills people every day. Hold on.
Can I interject one thing to say?
No, you're just going to totally...
Only one
derail
point.
thing.
One quick point.
No? All right.
In the grand scheme of all the black ops, of all the things to keep covert, the discovery of aliens and alien technology would be the most reason to keep it secret, because the capability to create or reverse engineer new technology and create an advantage is obviously unprecedented. So there would be an incredible incentive, far more greater incentive to keep black ops and keep privacy in this. So I'm giving it validity.
What if they killed your wife, the mother of your children, to keep the UFOs a secret? Because she was going to go tell it to the Washington Post.
They'd have to kill me too.
So, but what I was saying is that, and what this guy is kind of putting out there, is that it's not just the men in black that have been killing people. It's the NHI, non-human intelligence. We're essentially talking about these aliens or whatever it is, have engaged in murder, killing, and mutilation of humans. And we have, I think we're pretty well known, these like mass slaughtering of cattle sometimes. I think we've all like kind of anecdotally seen that in the news somewhere. I mean, animals get slaughtered a lot, but that could just be like a tiger that went, or a lion or whatever, mountain lion, whatever. But a lot of times the way these animals are slaughtered is not really like another animal slaughtered them, like they're singed, or the cuts not like an animal's claws or teeth or whatever. So very suspicious on the animals. And then, yeah, maybe they did kill. I mean, we have all these instances of people saying they were abducted by UFOs. A lot of them obviously are bullshit, but maybe they have been abducting us. Maybe they have been anal probing everybody. Maybe they have been killing people and mutilating them. Probably look at us like insects. Like, who cares? You open one of these guys up, see what's going on inside. I mean, why wouldn't they just do it on their spaceship? I mean, who knows? I don't know. It seems like we're on the cusp of this breaking wide open, maybe in the next couple of years. I don't know.
Agree that, I mean, I do believe aliens exist, because just statistically, the universe, as big as it is, it's unlikely that we're the only intelligent life in the universe. Second, it would make sense, again, as I mentioned, just from the covert aspect of the capability, the reverse engineering potential. If you had a downed aircraft, like, you would want to keep that as secret as possible, because you would want to exploit that to the maximum capability. So, I mean, I do believe aliens exist, and I do believe it's a possibility. Religion was a much bigger part of the world 100 years ago. So, like, there would be a much less accepting public of aliens than there are now. So I think that's an incentive to keep it quiet. I don't know all the details of killings or any of that. Actually, you mentioned all these mass slaughter of farm animals. I'm actually not that familiar with that, but that would make sense. Do think aliens are out there, and it'll be interesting to see what is released in the future, because I think the public's ready for it.
Well, we're going to have to be ready for it, because it's coming right at us. It might be humans from the future, but then it's like, why are they dissecting us, or why are they fucking with us? It's like they know who we are.
But I mean, I don't think this guy gains anything from being this whistleblower.
Oh, no, he doesn't gain anything. His life is totally turned upside down. All these whistleblowers, I'm not going to say all of them, most of them, whatever, are probably doing it because they think it's the right thing to do, hopefully. Then you get like Snowden, then you get like Chelsea Manning, you get like all this stuff. So
a decision was made, let's say 100 years ago, to classify this and be like, we're not going to ever unclassify it. And it's like, at some point that needs to be revisited by a modern individual. Whenever this was discovered, they were like, lock it down. And that was back in the age of big FBI, cloak and dagger stuff. Now we need to maybe revisit that decision. And then the other one in this article, it mentioned how like Gaddafi apparently discovered a downed aircraft, and that's still being kept under wraps. Like, I get it if the US could keep something secret, but unless Gaddafi like sold that to China or Russia, because he's not going to be able to exploit a downed Russian aircraft. Like, he doesn't have that capability. So that was where I actually found it less believable.
These alien tech drops are going to happen. If they come in and there's a crash or whatever happens, you know, whoever gets there first gets that spacecraft, get that technology. That could change the course of all of human history. We need to be ready to retrieve this equipment wherever it is in the world by any means necessary at any time. That should be a military mission. I hope they've got units that are doing that. I think they do have something. I mean, they have these capabilities to recover nuclear weapons and stuff. So I would assume they've got something out there, contractors, whatever. You know, we have to. I mean, we can't just be like, oh, there's some alien ship just landed in Alaska. Are we going to let the Russians get there first or something? I mean, we have to be like ready for this stuff. Our last article we're talking about is Elon Musk's Mars plans. And we have, Mason likes these big mega projects, these big ideas and stuff like that. So I think he would like this. I liked it too. It's based on his ideas of trying to get 1 million people on Mars by 2050. He has his spaceship from SpaceX called Starship, 400-foot reusable Starship. And he's hoping to create a cargo route to Mars using terraforming and building it up over time to create a self-sustaining planet. Humans would live in giant glass domes. They would melt the polar ice caps, form a direct democracy. He's hoping to put the first person on Mars by 2029. There's some problems. We could talk about that. Mason was really interested in this? What do you think?
A couple things. First of all, on the note of his space program, I think he's doing it a little bit wrong. The reusable rocket ship, that's a brilliant idea. That should be the first leg. I think he needs to break it up into really 2 legs, maybe 3. So like the ability to exit the Earth's atmosphere, then land at like a space station. And then from there, you launch your mission is what I would guess. Spacecraft should be tailored to the mission. It's a different mission to escape the Earth's atmosphere than it is to traverse from the Earth to Mars. So that's my thought would be, and I'm probably wrong in this respect. I'm sure their engineers have already thought this through. It's best to have one craft. But in my logical head, long term, the best case is an exit Earth's atmosphere craft, a space station, and then from there, a launch point with a different vehicle specifically designed for interplanetary travel. So that being stated first, I think it's an ambitious timeline, but possible. And so you look at it, he has basically 25 years. I don't think 1 million people is really that possible, but it could be. So I'm thinking about from a program perspective, the agile approach. Let's say I think it's 1 year round trip, just travel time to get to Mars and back. And then let's say 1 year on the ground for research, whatever they're going to try and do. So the first manned mission to Mars is going to be 2 years minimum. And then you're going to start having a lot of your lessons learned. They'll be doing lessons learned during it. But if you break down like a 20-year period, that really gives you 8 to 10 iterations of missions to Mars, if you're fully funded. Anyway, again, assuming fully funding, that's a big thing. And that's assuming that there's no in-between missions where there's going to be some gaps. So you're going to have to carefully coordinate like relief teams for the initial landing craft so that you always have personnel there, keeping your colony, the initial like colonies manned, because I think that's going to be important. The other thing is I think a lot of the problems they're pointing out, well, it's good to point out those problems, maybe they're thinking too big for the initial colony, right? The initial colony could just be like some dome and they terraform just that dome through human means, right? Because what I found really funny is they're saying they need CO2. We can melt the ice caps to make that happen, but humans exhale CO2. So if you have a small enough dome and you bring some farm animals, eventually there's going to be enough CO2 there that you're going to have a slightly habitable, like isolated own little biodome. And then you just slowly expand biodome, biodome, biodome. At the same time, you're terraforming the entire planet. That's going to be a 100-year program, not a 20-year. Like at first, you just need to get people there and let them be able to survive in a biodome. Then you can start doing all these grand programs. And then the final thought is, I love the stupidity of modern science because you hear all this thing like, oh, we got to eliminate CO2 on Earth, right? We need all the carbon sinks, like carbon dioxide is going to, global warming is going to be the end of us all. But then you think like, oh, in order to create life on Mars, what do we need? CO2.
On Earth, it's too much CO2. Obviously, we need CO2. The problems that they mention and they're putting against Elon's long-term vision of terraforming Mars and turning it into a planet where you could actually walk around without the biodome or some spacesuit is the lack of current terraforming tech. So the tech would have to be developed and we don't have that yet. They say that there's not enough CO2 on Mars to create a thick atmosphere like the one we have on Earth that would allow us to breathe and protect us from the sun. Again, the sun's radiation or atmosphere, the Earth's magnetic core protect us from solar radiation and space radiation, cosmic radiation, which would over time, fuck our bodies up if we were just there without some sort of like protective, like radioactive protective.
Biodome.
Whatever.
The biodome.
Yeah, something like that. So there's some problems there. They also say when we get to Mars that we should be looking for signs of ancient life to find out if we're alone in the universe. And I think we probably don't need to go to Mars to figure that one out. They're coming to us. They said it would be cosmic vandalism for the archaeologists, the Martian archaeologists. There's one more.
Well, that's the one I found really funny.
Dude. And there's one more issue here, which is the lower gravity, which isn't just, you're bouncing around on Mars, but it's also the way that our bodies work, like our intestines, our heartbeat, our blood pressure. We are adapted to the gravity on Earth. So over time, it could cause like medical problems.
But that's a known risk for the astronauts, and they accept that risk when they go on.
Yeah, but if you live on Mars, you're probably not coming back. Whatever. Anyway, go ahead, Mace.
I found that cosmic vandalism to be the funniest argument against it. It's like, we shouldn't go to Mars because one day we might want to go to Mars. Is what he's really saying. Like, we shouldn't go to Mars because we might destroy something that we want to find on Mars. So it just was like that. It's that circular logic that just makes no fucking sense. And it's why I hate people who are just critics. You need those critics because, okay, great.
He was talking about terraforming because if you go up there and you start messing with the atmosphere, you melt the polar ice caps, that evidence of the earlier ancient civilizations might be destroyed.
Or it might be uncovered.
Who knows, man?
So it's one of those, it's just people that don't get critics. I hate critics, but you need them because they point out flaws in your plan and then you can adapt to it. But like, again, as we just pointed out, yes, it's going to be physiologically challenging for the astronauts, right? It's going to impact them in ways we cannot foresee. But that's the risk the astronaut's willing to take. And it's going to be like, at first, a manned mission might be 4 to 10 people. And those people are going to be briefed on that risk. They'll choose to accept that risk. Hopefully they live. I'm not signing up for that mission, but
yeah, I'm cool here.
Yeah, I'm staying on Earth, guys. Again, the agile approach. The minimum viable product is you get like a landing crew to land on Mars, take off and get back successfully. The next product would be a facility like you saw in The Martian with Matt Damon, where they actually have a facility that they can live in. The first guys would probably drop off enough gear and leave it there so that the second guys, when they come, have enough to build it.
I think they would leave people there on the first mission. You would go, some people would return home, some people would stay.
Hopefully, if that's capable.
I would just go ahead.
That's all. So I'm just saying it's got to be an iterative approach. And so this is why the agile methodology is the best in the project management world, is like, okay, the first minimum viable product is you get to Mars and back. Maybe we're going to add in the capability to land on Mars. Maybe we're going to add in even like dropping off some equipment for the next team. Or maybe we're going to even land some people. So that's kind of the first round. And that might be in 2030. Once you create that first capability, then it's again, let's do it a couple more times. And the 1 million people is even somewhat possible, because once that capability is fleshed out, let's say by 2030, we get the first mission to Mars. By 2040, it's like not that hard anymore. Then you can start doing, instead of 1 or 2 spaceships at a time, you can do 20 every year. And then you can start really sending equipment. So at that point, humanity reaches its future, which is space travel. I think the future of humanity is colonizing the entire universe. And this is the first step.
Yeah, we're a virus. They're saying that alternatively, they could build a lunar base and there's water on the moon, but obviously same issues. Could be $35 billion. Obviously, it would be easier on the moon. The Mars base could cost between $100 billion and $1 trillion. So we got to decide where we're going to.
I agree that the moon should be first because it's closer, easier, cheaper. Right? Let's test the capability.
I mean, Elon doesn't give a fuck about the moon. Elon wants to go to Mars.
That's his ego. But that maybe if the government's funding it, we can tell them where to go. But I'll say on the note, what I want to argue with you about is the virus component. That makes no sense because right now we're trying to bring life to a place that is devoid of life.
Yeah, so that we can like use its resources and like.
But right now it's lifeless. So we're going to create life in a place that does not have life.
Resources and
that's
stuff
the opposite
that we just want to
of a
like.
Virus.
Yeah, we're spreading to a new host. You know, we're like a parasite.
It's a dead host that has nothing. That has no life. So we're going to bring life to something that had no life. I feel like
there's just different ways of looking at it. But I mean, yeah, we're going to spread all over the place like a virus. But we have to, because if something happens on Earth, humans need to persist. Any one human, any one country, any group of people, it doesn't matter. Like we have to keep going as a species. That way we propagate. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of going to work or having kids or doing anything if all the humans are not going to be around? And our legacy is to perpetuate humanity.
Maybe to bring life to the universe.
I mean, there's probably already life out there, man. We're just one different type of insect compared to the others.
Probably, but maybe not. Maybe the divine mission of man, if you believe in God, is to spread life to the universe. And it got started on Earth. And eventually we'll be able to bring life, bring cows, bring chickens, bring all the other animals that we choose to, mostly the domesticated ones probably. But there's going to be cows on Mars. There's going to be chickens on Mars. That's cool. That's not humans as a virus. That's, okay, you look at it pessimistically, like, oh, we're taking over resources, but it's not doing anything right now. Nobody's using it. Nobody's living there.
It's just a way of characterizing it, man.
Yeah, but a virus kills its host, I think, usually.
I mean, it doesn't have to. A good virus doesn't kill its host because then it has a better chance of like moving around. The sickness that people are getting that starts with a C is getting not as powerful as time goes on because it's more effective for it. If it kills the host, it can't go on to more people as easily. So
true. I mean, the analogy is not completely invalid. I just dislike it because it's very pessimistic about humanity and space travel. Like, I don't think space travel is delivering evil to the universe. I think it's delivering life to the universe.
I don't think we have any idea what's going to happen. Yeah.
True. In the grand scheme of the global deity meaning of life and the meaning of the universe, I know absolutely shit.
Neither do I. So that's the end of it. So good. Episode 6, Real Veteran News. Mason Ballou, John Koenig. Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Have a good one, guys. Thanks for tuning in.